My dear friends, I hope this finds you well. I feel like it's been a while since I've spoken to you from this space. I've been sitting elsewhere during my weekly videos, but here I am back for this late night edition. It's not late night for you, but it's late night for me, maybe as you can tell by my eyes. Anyway, hope you are well. Hope you've had a good week. Kids went back to school. Many kids went back to school, which has been fantastic. And here we are, starting the Torah anew. I want to talk about Bereshit, but in order to get there, I want to share with you a study that was done a couple years ago at the University of British Columbia. And at the University of British Columbia, they had participants in a study read a short story by Franz Kafka, called The Country Doctor, in which the dentist started to act like a horse, and in which the family asked from a dentist to pull out the teeth of their toothless child, and all these sort of strange, what we would call Kafkaesque elements to the story. It was a weird story. And they had people read that story, and they had other people read a similar version of the story, but where they changed it so that there wasn't any elements of the absurd. And then they had those different people, the different groups, try to pick up patterns in words. And they found that the people who had read the correct version of the Kafka story, meaning the absurd, the Kafkaesque version of the story, were better at picking up the patterns in the words than those people who had read kind of an edited version to help it make sense. Similarly, they did a similar study with participants who watched a David Lynch film. I don't know if you've seen any David Lynch films, but they're pretty wacky. And they had another group watch an episode of The Simpsons. And they, once again, found that the people who watched the David Lynch film were able to pick up on patterns and ideas that the people who just watched The Simpsons could not. Fascinating idea. Fascinating idea. This idea that somehow when we're exposed to things that don't make sense, it actually activates, if you will, a certain creativity, a certain creative power that we have. And I was thinking about this idea that, of course, my mother shared with me, which is where I get many of these interesting studies from. And, you think about the Torah. There's a lot of things in the Torah that make sense. There are certain narratives that make sense, of course. But there's also a lot of things that don't. And it's very easy to say, okay, they don't make sense. Throw it away. Contradictions, and many people do. But that's never been our approach. Our approach is to take things that are challenging, take text that is difficult and contradictory seemingly, and then come to a deeper understanding because there is a contradiction. So for example, the Torah tells us that on the third day of creation, there was plants. Plants were created. But then we know in the second chapter, it talks about how when human beings were going to be created, and it says, and there were no plants yet. So what does it mean, right? Weren't plants created on the third day and human beings created on the sixth day? Right? So how can it say that when they're creating Adam and Chava, then there were no plants? So of course this leads the Gemara to say a fascinating, a powerful idea that the plants were created, but they had yet to break through. So they were there in potential, but there was nothing to cause the rain to come down to actually bring them out of the earth. And it was only once Adam and Chava were created that they could sense that there was something missing. And then they prayed for the rain, and then the plants grew forth. And so it would be very easy to see this contradiction and say, oh, it doesn't make sense, and it's nonsense. But instead, what our tradition does is come to a deeper understanding, a creative understanding as a result of this contradiction. And the Torah is filled with that. It's filled with that, filled with these sorts of ideas. The Torah is never simplistic. People try to reduce the Torah to a simplistic thing we can wrap our minds around. For example, the idea that the world was created in 6 days, 7 days. Yes, many people believe that. Many people much greater than I believe that. But I think that's a simplified, simplistic answer. It doesn't have to be that way. I don't believe that that's what the Torah is telling us. It was 6 specific days. That's for another time. I'm sure that this, of all the things that people will pick up in the video, this is all that people will care about. But the point is that the Torah is not meant to be straightforward. Some things are straightforward, but much of it is challenging, and it demands of us to read deeply and with wisdom and with creativity and with ingenuity. And this is a powerful message for life as well. We are often faced with contradictions. We are often faced with difficulties. And the same study found that individuals who went through challenging times were able to uncover creative abilities that they had not been aware of before. Because when life stops making sense, you're no longer on cruise control. You're forced to think about things differently and then to come to deeper insights. And I think that's what's being demanded of us now. You know, maybe we've gotten used to this kind of COVID lifestyle, but we shouldn't. There's a contradiction here. There's a difficulty here. And we need these difficulties to push us to more creative thinking, to more divergent thinking, to come to ways of understanding what is needed of us as human beings that will allow us to move forward. This is what's being asked of us right now. And so I want to bless all of us as we start the Torah anew. May we face the contradictions in the Torah and in life with courage, with openness, with honesty. And may they open up within us a creativity to understand how the Torah is just as, if not more relevant today than ever. And also open up for us a path through which we can make some sense of this world, but more importantly, be there for each other, help each other, and heal the world together. With that, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom. All the best.